Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtotara Shatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the Samudra. All glories to the Samudra. All glories to the Samudra. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gaura. Thank you everyone for coming to the Srimad Bhagavatam class this morning. Please forgive me for daring to speak before so many Vaishnavas who are much more qualified than myself. This morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 6, entitled The Downfall of Saubhati Muni. Thank you. I'll just begin with the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So Canto 9, Chapter 6, we're in the section that describes the downfall of Saubhati Muni. And we're in text 50. So I'll go ahead and recite the Sanskrit and please repeat after me. Aho imam pashyata me vinasham. Tapasvina satcharita vratasya. Andarjale varichara prasanga. Prachyavitam brahmachiram dhritam yad. Aho imam pashyata me vinasham. Tapasvina satcharita vratasya. Antarjale varichara prasangat. Prachyavitam brahmachiram dhritam yad. Aho imam pashyata me vinasham. Tapasvina satcharita vratasya. Antarjale varichara prasangat. Prachyavitam brahmachiram dhritam yad. Who would like to repeat?
Aho imam pashyata me vinasham.
Aho imam pashyata me vinasham.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Prachyavitam brahmachiram dhritam yad.
Prachyavitam brahmachiram
vinasham.
Aho imam pashyatame vinasham.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Prachavitam brahmachiram tritam yat.
Prachavitam brahmachiram tritam yat.
Mataji's?
Aho pashyatame vinasham.
Aho imam pashyatame vinasham.
Tapasvina satcharita vatasya.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Prachyavitam brahmachiram vitam yat.
Prachavitam brahmachiram tritam yat.
Aho imam pashyatame vinasham.
Aho imam pashyatame vinasham.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Tapasvina satcharita vratasya.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Antarjale varichara prasanga.
Prachavitam brahmachiram
Prachavitam brahmachiram
tritam yat.
tritam yat.
Okay. Aho,
Aho,
alas,
alas,
imam,
imam,
this,
this,
pashyata,
pashyata,
just see,
just see,
me,
me,
of me,
of me,
vinasham,
vinasham,
fall down,
fall down.
tapasvinaha,
Tapasvinaha,
who is such a great mystic,
who was mystic,
performing austerity,
performing austerities,
satcharita,
satcharita,
of very good character,
a very good character,
observing all necessary rules and regulations,
observing all necessary rules and regulations,
vratasya,
vratasya,
of one who has taken a vow strictly,
of the one who is taken about strictly,
antahjale,
Antarjale,
in the depths of the water,
in the depth of the water,
varichara prasangat,
Varichara prasanga,
because of the affairs
because of the affairs
of the aquatics,
of the aquatics,
prachavitam,
Prachavitam,
fallen,
fallen,
Brahma,
Brahma,
from the activities of Brahman realization
From the
activities of Brahma realization,
or austerity,
austerity,
chidam,
Chiram,
for a long time,
for a long time,
dhritam,
Vikram,
executed,
executed,
yat,
Yat,
which.
which,
Now we'll read the translation. We're reading this verse and the next verse, and then the verse after this one has a purport. The translations and purports by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is Shobhari Muni speaking here. Alas, while practicing austerity, even within the depths of the water, and while observing all the rules and regulations practiced by saintly persons, I lost the results of my long austerities simply by association with the sexual affairs of fish. Everyone should observe this fall down and learn from it. So the next verse, I'll just read the Sanskrit myself quickly. Sangam tyajeta mithunavratinam mumukshu sarvatmanana visrijet bahirindriyani ekashtaran rahasi chittamananda ishe yundita tadvratishu sadhishu chetprasangaha. A person desiring liberation from material bondage must give up the association of persons interested in sex life and should not employ his senses externally in seeing, hearing, talking, walking, and so on. One should always stay in a secluded place, completely fixing his mind at the lotus feet of the unlimited personality of Godhead. And if one wants any association at all, he should associate with persons similarly engaged. Purport. Shobhari Muni, giving conclusions derived from his practical experience, instructs us that persons interested in crossing to the other side of the material ocean must give up the association of persons interested in sex life and accumulating money. This is also advised by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nishkinchanasya bhagavad bhajanonmukasya param param jiganishor bhavasagarasya sandarshanam vishayinam matayoshitam cha ha hanta hanta vishabhakshanato jasadhu. This is a verse from the Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natika 8.27. Alas, for a person seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord without material motives, seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification and seeing a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison willingly. One who desires complete freedom from material bondage can engage himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He must not associate with vishayi, materialistic persons, or those interested in sex life. Every materialist is interested in sex. Thus, in plain language, it is advised that an exalted saintly person avoid the association of those who are materially inclined. Srila Narottam Das Thakur also recommends that one engage in the service of the acharyas, and if one wants to live in association, he must live in the association of devotees. Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Shane Bhash. The Krishna consciousness movement is creating many centers just to create devotees, so that by associating with the members of such a center, people will automatically become uninterested in material affairs. Although this is an ambitious proposal, this association is proving effective by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By gradually associating with the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, simply by taking prasad and taking part in chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, ordinary persons are being considerably elevated. Saubhari Muni regrets that he had bad association even in the deepest part of the water. Because of the bad association of the sexually engaged fish, he fell down. A secluded place is also not secure unless there is good association. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, well, I'm very embarrassed to be sitting up here speaking in front of so many exalted devotees here, especially Goswami Prabhu, Devaki Prabhu, Krishna Charana, Vandamataji. Thank you so much for tolerating me. Please kindly give me your blessings that I can say something that will be of value. Okay, so just before this verse, we were hearing how Subramani had, after many, many years, a very long time of performing austerities, he sought a very, very secluded place to perform austerities where he wouldn't be disturbed by anybody and where he hoped that he wouldn't find any bad association at all. He went to the bottom of a river, I believe, very deep in the bottom, underwater, and he chose that place to perform his austerities. But we were hearing how just by seeing a couple of fish engaged in sexual affairs, it re-sparked within him the desire to himself engage in sexual affairs. And so he came up out of the water and he requested the king to marry one of his daughters, and he ended up with $50 of this king, marrying all of them. And he was very immersed and entangled in household life, family life. And in the previous verse it described that although in his household life, he was enjoying a lot, he enjoyed sense gratification. He was not at all satisfied, just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat or oil. And so this, we're at a part now where Subramani has become reflective about his situation. One day he was sitting in a secluded place and he started thinking to himself about his situation, and he was observing that he's actually coming to a condition of fall down. And so now this is the first verse in which he's actually acknowledging himself. He's really come to the realization of, wow, I've really hit rock bottom. What have I gotten myself into? And so his takeaway from this experience, the lesson that he's expressing here, that he's learning from his own mistakes, is that there's incredible importance in avoiding materialistic situation and in gaining the association of sadhus, persons who have a similar mentality of wanting to rise above the material platform, attain liberation, and of course beyond that, becoming engaged in Krishna consciousness, in the devotional service of the Lord. So Prabhupada is really stressing in this point that one should not, in this purport, that one should not have the association, one should not take the association of people who are vishayi, materialistic persons, which means, in short, people who are interested in sex life, interested in money, interested in acquiring things, and even acquiring people through relationships, to experience pleasure through one's senses and mind. So we should avoid the association of those who are materially inclined. And for persons who hear this kind of message for the first time, it might seem kind of extreme because the vast majority of the people on this planet are Vishayi, or fall into this category of Vishayi, materially interested persons who are interested in sex life and car money. So they might be quite afraid that, particularly if a family member, if one of their family members comes into contact with the Krishna consciousness movement, and then they learn that this kind of message is presented in this movement, they may be worried that, these kinds of people, they may be practicing a very extreme kind of lifestyle. It sounds like with this kind of philosophy, they would be isolated from society in an unhealthy way. It might lead towards kind of radicalized behavior. There are, some radical religious groups in the world who become infamous for performing various kinds of nefarious acts, even up to the point of violent acts or acts which lifestyles which may even cause their own members to neglect their position in the world. But we can understand through the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam that people in this world are actually in a diseased condition of life. Because this way of relating with everything in the world, that we want to take it for our own pleasure, this is the default mentality. If you don't make some conscious effort to cultivate in some kind of higher mentality, then this is the automatic, this is like the automatic position. This is that lowest point that water automatically will find. It's just I see every object and even every person in relation to how can I get some experience of pleasure for myself. And it's a very selfish way of interacting and moving about the world. And therefore it's very, in plain language, it's called out in these books as being a diseased condition of life. And just as a person may find themselves in some kind of diseased or addicted condition of life, say for example, a person who's addicted to alcohol, we find that it's very well known in support groups for alcoholics that one of the most important stages of recovering from that condition is that they have to extricate themselves from the association of persons who have that same addiction. They have to bring themselves out of the association, a company of people who like to enjoy drinking. And so that's one of the most important steps of recovery. And so then, this is actually accepted in society. It's not seen as something very extreme, but they have to bring themselves out of that association and find a more positive association. And also we find that those who are exemplars in our lineage of exemplary devotees who for example, Rupa Goswami has taught in Nectar of Instruction that one of the most important things one has to do for one's spiritual life is to avoid association of materialistic person. He and the other 6 Goswamis, their known to have been actually friends to all people. It's described that both the scholarly gentlemen and the ruffians of society were very attracted to them and appreciated them. And so it's not that because they didn't want to take association with materialistic people, it's not that they simply renounced everybody in all aspects of society, but they could see everybody in their rightful position as eternal spiritual part and parcels of Krishna, and they could see the potential of every person to become reinstated in their eternal constitutional position. And so they interacted with all the members of society, but with this higher vision in mind of what our real connection is through our original divine source, Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he proclaims himself to be the Father of all living entities. So in this way, the six Goswamis were able to interact with human society and all the whole society of living beings, and without taking any materialistic association, they became a positive conduit for spiritual association. And so they're great examples of how this principle, there's no need for this principle of avoiding materialistic association to create a kind of unhealthy isolation. And indeed, we're hearing in this verse and purport how Prabhupada is explaining that a secluded place is not necessarily going to help one to avoid bad association. Sabrimuni still found a bad association of two sexually engaged fish. And so a secluded place is not secure unless there's good association, Srila Prabhupada is saying. So that's the positive here is that we can't live in a vacuum. So if we're not engaged in developing friendships and relationships with persons who are interested in enjoying the material energy, then we need to make bonds with persons who are of a similar mentality, that want to move up in life. They want to take the upward path. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining that this is the very purpose why the Krishna consciousness movement is creating so many centers all over the world. It's actually just to give association. It's just to create opportunities for people to come together and associate with higher-minded people who can help them to engage in devotional service and understand their real identity. And Srila Prabhupada quotes Narottam Das Thakur saying, Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Shanivas. Bhakta Shanivas means to live with the devotees, to live with the devotee people. And he's saying that Janame Janame Hoy Ea Vilash, life after life, this is my only wish, that I can just be able to live in the association of devotees and have some service at their feet. And so this principle of association is so important that Prabhupada established hundreds of centers. Well, this time a little over 100, but since that time, since he's left also, the movement is continuing, and there are hundreds and hundreds of centers established just for the purpose of allowing opportunities for the sadhu sangha. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a very nice verse that describes the value and importance of sadhu sangha. Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Hoy Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Prema Janme Tingho Punamukhya Yanga. This verse says that Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula, the cause of Krishna Bhakti being born in one's life, the cause of Krishna Bhakti appearing in a person's life is sadhu sangha, is that they got the opportunity to meet a devotee of Krishna who has that devotion for Krishna in his heart and is therefore able to share it and water the seed of devotion in that person's heart. And this is how a person goes from being a Vishayi, from being a materially oriented person, to turning their face towards Krishna and wanting to offer some service to Krishna. It's through that touch with the sadhu, with the devotee. But the central role of sadhu sangha doesn't end at that point. The next line is Krishna prema janme teho punamukya anga. And the appearance of Krishna prema, that also is caused by the very same anga. That is chiefly caused by the very same thing, which is having the association of devotees. So one of the things that Jaini Thai Prabhu was mentioning in his recent seminar is there can be a tendency in devotional communities of overemphasizing giving time and attention to new persons to the point that one may inadvertently neglect those who have already come, or the person who was a new person 6 months ago, but now he's chanting, he's reading, so okay, he's good to go. Let's just engage him in some service, and he doesn't get the same kind of attention that a newer person will get. But if we're guided by this verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita, then we'll ask ourselves, well, has that person got Krishna prema yet? And if the answer is no, then we'll know that we still need to keep investing. That person still needs to have regular quality time with the devotees until the point, at least, of developing pure love of God. So it's the process. Sadhu Sangha is the process by which we come to devotional service, and it's the process by which we continue to develop in devotional service. So this association is for everybody at all stages of devotional service, before, during, and after. And Prabhupada describes what it is, this association, and he gives us, he makes it very simple and easy for us. He says, simply by taking prasad and taking part in chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, ordinary persons are being considerably elevated. And so one can simply, just as we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, even with the great advanced devotees, they're coming together and they're feasting on Krishna prasadam, and they're singing, they're dancing, they're chanting the names of Krishna, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. They're hearing some nice talk about Krishna and Krishna, the science of Krishna. Very pleasing to hear all of these things. And they're always, of course, happy to get the chance to serve the feet of the devotees, or the feet of the Lord. So this is the simple, joyful process of associating with devotees, and it's so pleasing that even if in the beginning one might feel that it's a bit strange to pull oneself out of intimate association with non-devotees, and it may be a little bit of a difficulty, but the pleasing result of just being with devotees, one can quickly forget whatever difficulty is there. And there's one sentence here. Yes. Srila Prabhupada says that by associating with the members of such a center in the Krishna consciousness movement, people will automatically become uninterested in material affairs. So by this positive exposure to the sweetness of the devotees and spending time with them and hearing from them, one just automatically becomes uninterested in material affairs, which are so dry and dull by comparison. And one can see, as Sabri Muni is seeing here through his epiphany, that actually this family life that he's, this self-centered kind of family life, which is based around enjoying one's senses together, it really only brings pain. She's feeling this pain that I gave up all my long austerities just to come engaged in material life, to again become in a condition of pain. So we understand how material affairs are very uninteresting and dry and even painful, and so when you hold it next to the light of associating with devotees, it doesn't seem attractive anymore. And one of the things that I really appreciate from this pastime is that, as we'll see in the next few verses, Sabrimuni, after having this realization, he again takes up where he left off, and he engages himself in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as he quits his body, he goes to the spiritual world. And so this is actually a very encouraging pastime, because it shows that there's no point in the course of one's devotional service, no matter what difficulties one may go through, or even if one has a small or even a large fall down at some point, there's no point at which one can't redirect himself. There's no point at which one has gone too far down to change their direction, to realize that, oh, I've made some big mistake. And it's never too late for a comeback. One can always come back from whatever condition one is in. If one gets even a small moment of clarity, where one remembers the Lord and remembers the intentions that they had before of dedicating themselves fully in the service of Krishna, then they can immediately make a recovery. So yeah, in brief, that's the thoughts I had about these verses and purport. So I'd like to invite the devotees to please make a comment or a reflection, or if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer. Any corrections?
Yes, Prabhu. As Prabhupada himself say that we should work to survive, especially we have to walk outside sometime in association of many devotees with all these activities.
Mm-hmm.
So you're surrounded by
Mm-hmm.
devotees, and we are told that we should not associate with many devotees. So how do we to manage and deal with the difficult situation of the time?
So how can this understanding be applied in a situation where one is in household life, taking care of their family duties, maintaining their household, and they're working in an organization where their co-workers are non-devotees, their bosses perhaps non-devotees. And so how does one apply the principle? How does this fit in with that? Because not everybody can simply live in the forest or in the temple or in an ashram. So there's a way in which one can actually spiritualize all the aspects of one's life. And Srila Prabhupada gives a very famous example of how you can take an iron rod, which if you just leave it alone, they tend to just be cold and cold and gray, and they don't have any of the qualities. That's like its natural quality in one sense. But if you take the same iron rod and you place it in the fire, then the iron rod begins to take on the qualities of the fire. It becomes hot, it becomes bright red, and if you take it and you touch it against some curtains, then it'll light the curtains on fire. So it develops the same qualities as the fire, just by being in touch with it. So there's a way in which if we mold our life in such a way that we're placing Krishna at the center of all our activities, and with this desire to simply offer Krishna all of my activities, all my wealth, my home, my close loved ones, whatever fruits of any activity I perform, I simply want to offer to Krishna, then that's equivalent to putting everything into this spiritual fire of devotional service. And so when we go to our workplace and we're interacting with co-workers who are non-devotees, if we have this firm sankalpa within us that my life is not meant for wasting my time trying to enjoy my senses, but it's meant for offering everything to Krishna, then I can still interact with everyone at my workplace, and I can still be friendly with them, but I'll know where the line is that I shouldn't cross in my relationships with them, to not go too close with them. And I've heard before that Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes that, I can't remember exactly what it is, so I just won't bring it up. But even in one's dealings with one's co-workers, discussing work, discussing basic conversation of getting to know one another, if one's whole sankalpa in life is to serve Krishna, and one does one's best to arrange their whole life around that, then even those exchanges will be spiritualized. And of course, in the workplace, there's many opportunities to share prasadam with co-workers, just on a more practical level, and then just be a devotee, be an effulgent devotee yourself, and people will notice that they'll notice that there's something special about you, and they may ask sometimes, or they may see a picture of Krishna on your desk, and they may ask about this. One devotee told the story of one co-worker who was harassing him a little bit in his workplace, because he was always hearing a lecture as he was working in an IT company. He was always hearing the lectures while he was doing his work. And there was one coworker who would come up to him and just pull one of the headphones out of his ear and listen to it for a moment. And when he heard that it was some lecture about Krishna or spiritual life, he would laugh at him, and it's when he did this day after day, he would say, like, "You're always listening to this, like, don't you have a life? Like, like, what are you just wasting your time listening to this all the time?" And but this devotee just tolerated day after day. This other person would sometimes poke and prod him and make fun of him, but he would just smile and and not react. He wouldn't react out of a sense of false ego. And one day, after a long time, this co-worker of his looked very morose. He looked very kind of depressed. And so he came up to this devotee, and who was always smiling, and he said, like, "How is it possible that you're always happy, you're always smiling, you never look depressed. And he said, well, it's because I'm always listening to this. And so the coworker appreciated it for the first time. Okay, so maybe there's some value in this. So yeah, I'm afraid I can't give very much of a realized answer to that. So I haven't really been so much in that kind of situation myself. Perhaps somebody else here could, if you'd like to chime in, could give a better answer to that. Thank you. Any other comments or reflections? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.